Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me all right in the back? Cool, thank you. Well, welcome to my session on creating multi-channel voice and chat experiences. So what exactly does that mean? A lot of times we build a chatbot or a voice interface, right? Like a skill, an Alexa skill. We're targeting Alexa, Echo, that whole ecosystem, or we're targeting Google Assistant. A lot of times, maybe we're just targeting voice and we build for Alexa and Google Assistant. But then we're leaving out stuff like Facebook Messenger and Slack and things like that. So how do we target all those channels and bring it into a single workflow that we can control and manage and scale, right? So a lot of times we'll build for one and say, okay, I'm gonna go and build for another one, and then you kind of replicate the code over and over again. It starts to get unruly, right? So just real quick too, let me see here. Helps if I have my clicker. So before I get too deep in that, I just want to cover what the agenda is for today. And the first thing we're going to cover are the prereqs. So if you want to follow along, you could go ahead and download some of the prereqs that we're going to cover, like the IDE and whatnot. If you don't want to follow along, that's fine. You could just pay attention, basically. So we're going to cover the problem statement, the solution, and then we're going to cover the solution architecture. And then we're going to get some coding done, right? How many of you guys are actual coders here, just to get a show of hands? Okay. Are you guys going to follow along, or are you guys totally doing something else right now? You'll see how it goes. Okay, no worries. I'll tell you what, I'll just talk to it at a high level. At the end, I'm going to share the deck and the code as well, so you could always keep up later. All right, why is this not working? There we go. All right, so what do you need to follow along? You'll need some kind of IDE or text editor. I will be using Visual Studio Code, and I'll be writing in Node.js. Doesn't have to be Node.js, it could be C#, Python, whatever your preferred language is. Everything is abstracted very high level, so very easy to follow along. We're going to start with the ASK CLI. So if you actually haven't used that before, it's actually pretty cool. Go ahead, download it. Once you download it, you're going to run ASK init. And when you do that, you'll be able to plug into your AWS account and your Alexa developer account. Speaking of accounts, we're going to plug into the Amazon Dev Portal, so you will need an account for that. You'll also need an account for AWS. AWS is free. I've been using it for like 3 years. Haven't had a problem. I haven't been charged, so it's pretty cool. But it does require the CC credit card authorization. If you already have an account, cool. Google Dialogflow. So you're probably looking at this and saying, wow, we're going to do Amazon and Google. It's pretty cool. You're going to need Dialogflow, so go ahead and set up an account for that. And then Facebook. You're probably looking at it saying, Facebook, oh, no, Facebook. But Facebook, if you already have it, cool. If not, it's optional. Feel free to plug it in. Otherwise, we could just talk to it and you'll be able to walk through all that. So real quick, a bit about me. My name is Walter Quesada. I'm a software engineer for about 20-odd years now. Some folks call me Walt Q or Q, and some other folks just call me Quesadilla, which I'm perfectly fine with because I'm a bit cheesy, so it's all good. So I'm also part of the Alexa Champions program, a Pluralsight instructor. I have 2 courses on Pluralsight, and also an O'Reilly author. So like any of that matters, right? So what's the current state of multi-channel skills and chatbots, right? So it's very monolithic, right? With a few exceptions. I'm not saying it's all monolithic, don't get me wrong. I really hate to generalize, but a lot of times we'll find like a template out there or some kind of framework, and we go ahead and install it, and we're up and running, and it's all self-contained in this one application, and it's not really, that scalable when it comes to that. So it's very monolithic. And so that causes a lot of code duplication, right? If we want to spin up another bot, we make a copy of it, and now we have 2 bots, or whatever the case is, right? So a lot of grouping of concerns, which is the opposite of what? Separation of concerns, right? And that's really best practice when it comes to architecture, and it's just not scalable. And so what's the ideal state is to take advantage of modern technologies like serverless architecture and microservices, be able to scale broadly. Separation of concerns, of course. You want to not only separate your functions into serverless or microservices, you also want to separate your data layer and your logic layer and things like that. So, it's pretty much standard design principles, right? And just make it overall extremely scalable. So here's how you would do that. You would start with your comms channels, right? You'll want to target the folks where they live. So you identify the channels you want to target. So if your audience lives in Facebook or in Slack or in Alexa or wherever that is, you identify those channels and you get them ready for integration. For each one of those channels, you're going to have a channel connector. So let's say channel A is Alexa, channel B is Facebook. You create a connector specifically for those. And then it's scalable in the sense that you could have more channels, right? So 30, 40 different channels you could plug into them just by creating a connector for each one of those. And then each of the connectors then converge into an intent router, right? And the way you do that is by creating a common model, right? A common model that pretty much gets mapped from the request payloads from the different channels, because they all have their respective request and response payload formats, right? It's generally all in JSON, right? But they all have their own nuances and whatnot, and they're all format, right? So there are some commonalities there, like the intent name, right? And most of them all have intent names. Most of them all have request message, most of them. Alexa doesn't, but that's okay. There's also entities, right? Entities. Some folks call them entities, some folks call them slots, some folks call them parameters. You can map all those different entities and all those different variables to, I don't know, let's call it parameters, let's say, right? And that'll be part of your common model. And then the common model, once it gets mapped from the connector, it gets passed over like a baseball over to the intent router. The intent router, you could build that in all kinds of different ways. You can make it data-driven, so you could have intent models in your database, right? It could be a graph database, it could be NoSQL, whatever your preferred database is. You pull a query based on intent name or action label or whatever you want to use as your identifier. In there, you'll have intent handling specification, right? So where you want the handling to be done. Generally, it could be a URL to another microservice or something like that. And then that's where the intent handling comes into play. So the intent handling, basically, you could scale to the thousands of intent handlers. It could be anything from, getting the weather or, getting cryptocurrency prices or whatever. It's very task-oriented, very specific, and it's staying true to what microservices is all about, right? And then third-party services. And so here you're going to plug into third-party APIs. So whether it's, if you're doing a skill or a bot for getting weather, maybe you plug into NOAA Weather Service, maybe you plug into Yahoo Weather API or whatever you want to plug into. But the cool thing is, you're doing that at this level, in the intent handler level, and so you could easily swap it out for something else. If one year you're using Yahoo Weather Service, next year you want to switch over to NOAA, you could easily do that just by updating that one intent handler microservice or serverless function that specifically handles fetching the weather. And so, as you can see, it could scale to something that's tremendously huge. This is, and the reason why it's redacted is because it's from PwC, and I have to redact everything. So this is what it looks like for one of our larger scale implementations. So as you can see, it could scale very quickly and very largely. And so for our demo today, and like I said, you could totally follow along, code, all that stuff, I'll help you out. Or you could just, listen. We're going to plug into Amazon Alexa. And we're going to plug into Dialogflow integrations. Dialogflow integrations is pretty interesting because they're essentially doing the same thing we're going to do right now. But what's cool about it is they already have like 15 different channels. I believe it's 15, 13, 14, 15, something like that, channels that they support out of the box. So who here is familiar with Dialogflow? Everybody? So if you've implemented, you probably know already, if you've implemented this, you already know plugging into like Facebook Messenger or Slack is as easy as flipping a switch and plugging in some variables, keys and tokens and things like that. You're literally plugged in like 2 or 3 minutes time. It's pretty impressive. And so once you've made those connections, you plug into the rest of the workflow. And what's cool too, it's Amazon Alexa, it's very similar in that you could plug in. It's more than just Echo. I mean, today, right? When it first came out, 3, 4 years ago, it was really just the tall Echo devices, and that's all you're really targeting in that ecosystem. But now it's all multimodal, and I mean, you're talking about, Fire TVs, so large scale displays. You're talking about Echo shows, so you have the little square screens, and you have the spots, which are the circles, and so there's a whole other, ecosystem there that you're targeting, both audibly and visually. And so, did you have a question? Are you just stretching? It's all good. And so that's it for the channels for today. If you're interested in plugging into different channels, I could help you as well. Just let me know after the talk. And so we're going to create 2 connectors, one for Alexa and one for Dialogflow. For Alexa, we're actually going to use the SDK for that. So the Alexa, the ASK SDK, and CLI tools we'll be using for that. They're both going to be AWS Lambda functions for today's purpose. Now, if you totally hate AWS, that's fine. You could do it in Azure functions. You could do it in GCP, whatever your preferred function is, or serverless architecture. Now, we're not going to do the intent router here because we don't have time, but we'll create just one function that takes in the request payloads from both channel connectors. We'll do the conversion to some kind of common model. We'll just invent it on the fly and pass it over to our intent handler, which will be another Lambda function. And then inside that Lambda function, we're going to say, all right, let's hit some third-party API. In this case, we're going to hit Crypto Compare API. So you'll be able to say, what's the price of Bitcoin? Or something like that. I don't know. We'll make something up. So just a quick note on channels, and I was kind of alluding to this earlier. There's voice, right? So Amazon Alexa, Microsoft Cortana, Google Assistant, right? Those are all voice-first type of interfaces and channels. And then there's text. So in text, we have Facebook Messenger, we have Slack. We could even send text messages using like service like Twilio, right? And there's a multitude of other channels, right? There's even email. So if you want to slap a bot against email, you can totally do that as well. And then some of them have natural language processing, right? So in Alexa, when you get a request, when you get a request from Alexa, you get an intent model, right? The intent model contains intent name, parameter, or slots, sorry, and other things that you could use to, process and handle that intent. So Alexa, Cortana, Dialogflow integrations, all very similar. And so some of them are without NLP. So things like Google Hangouts Chat. So the new Hangouts Chat, which is available with, I believe, G Suite or G Apps, or I forgot what they call it these days. That's the new Hangouts, if you will. They have a pretty robust API where it sends you all the messages that people type into the bot, and then it's up to you to go hit NLP service at that point to actually process it, right? So it's up to you. You could plug into Watson conversational, you could plug into Dialogflow, you could plug into Lex, whatever you want to do there. And then if you plug into Facebook Messenger directly, not using Dialogflow integrations, so if you're not using integrations, and you plug into Facebook directly, Slack, Twilio, and those other types of service, you're also not getting any NLP, right? So you have to handle that differently than what you would with if you get it with NLP. And so NLP maybe, right? In the case of Microsoft Bot Framework, you could totally just get a plain text message or whatever, an image or something from the Bot Framework, and solely up to you to decide whether you even want to use NLP or not. If you plug it into Lewis, it has great tight integration with Lewis. So in that case, you will get an intent model. And if you don't, you could always make calls also. It's flexible enough that you can make calls to like Watson and Dialogflow and other services through their APIs. And so now for the fun part, I'm going to pause here because I know there's a lot to digest. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, we're all grasping the concepts here. You have a question? Go ahead. Oh, okay. You want to borrow mine? I kind of need it for the presentation, but that's okay.
But can I get this course elsewhere? Like
Yeah. So after today's show, I will share with you the code as well as the deck, and then I also have a course on Pluralsight. The problem with the course is in C#, so you can follow along and just apply it to like Node or Python, whatever your preferred language is. Yeah, cool. All right, so we're gonna do this really quickly. Hopefully, has everyone eaten lunch here? Everyone's done with lunch? Who hasn't eaten lunch? You haven't eaten lunch? You gotta grab some lunch. Hopefully I'll finish soon. I think it was set for like an hour and a half, so how far into this are we? Let's see. Wow, I went through that in a quarter. Jeez, okay. All right, so I'm just gonna pull up. Now, if you've already downloaded the ASK CLI, yeah, then you should be good to go. If you've done init, you're good. If you already have it installed, even better. What you could do is just go ASK new. And I don't know if you could see that really well, but let me see what that looks like. Just bear with me for one moment. Can you guys see that all right? I know it's kind of blurry, but I guess I could just walk you through it. So what happens here is when you fire up ASK new, it says please type in your skill name. And so we'll give it something like Voice Summit Demo. I don't know, put a 1 because I already have Voice Summit Demo, so. Okay, so that was pretty quick. We created a new project for Alexa. It's created, so if we look at it here, this is kind of what it looks like in the folder. So you get a models folder and a Lambda folder, custom, and this is it. This is like a real bare bones hello world instance of an Alexa skill, right? Who here has not used the ASK skill kit, the CLI stuff? You haven't used it before? You haven't used it either? Okay, interesting. All right, so I'll tell you what, I'm going to switch over to my IDE. This is probably give you a better idea of what it looks like. So this is what we saw before, right? So the models and the Lambda folder. So let's take a look at the models folder here really quickly, just to give you a high level of what that looks like. Right off the bat, it gives you an English US language file, right? This is the interaction model, right? So this is where you go ahead and put your invocation name. If you're familiar with creating Alexa skills, you know that the invocation name is used when invoking your custom skill. So if, in our case, we're going to call it crypto rates. I don't know if there's a skill out there that already exists called crypto rates, but for our purpose today, we'll just call it crypto rates. So you'll be able to say, Alexa, ask crypto rates something, right? So that's the invocation name. And then we're going to go ahead and create some intents. Out of the box, it gives you all this stuff. So it gives you the cancel intent, the help intent, the stop intent. So if folks say stop or help or any of those things, it'll just dive right into those different intents. And so what I did here was I added a new one. I called it get crypto rates intent. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a handler for crypto rates intent. And we're going to handle that intent once it comes in. And that's going to have a slot value of name symbol. And so folks would be able to say things like, what's the price of Bitcoin, right? Or what's the price of Sia coin or Ethereum? Anybody here a cryptocurrency fanatic? Oh, I saw like a half. You were like, nah, I'm not. All right, that's all good. And then this is where the types are loaded here. And then there's the dialog. Now, you're probably looking at this going, what the heck is this? I don't want to type all this stuff out, these crazy IDs and things like that. Perfectly fine, you don't have to do any of that. What you could do is, you could come into the Alexa Skills Kit developer portal online, log into that, and you'll have the interaction models and things like that in here. Now, I skipped a step. One thing you got to do is, you're going to come into terminal, and you're going to hit ASK deploy. Okay? Now, ASK deploy is an awesome tool. I love it. You could do well, I'm sure you could do more than two things, but I really just use it for two things. You could deploy the entire skill, which is really cool, or you could just deploy one or the other. So there's the skill, manifest, and everything that comes with the skill, so all the intent models and things like that. And then there's the Lambda function, right? So if you think about it, Lambda is sitting in AWS, right? Which is a totally separate service from the developer portal and Alexa and all that. So just by doing ASK deploy, I could just push to both, or let's say I just want to target Lambda. I could just say T Lambda, and that'll just push the Lambda stuff. But since we just instantiated this for the first time, ASK new, I'm just going to go ahead and hit ASK deploy. And it gives me an error. Can't find skill JSON. Oh, that's okay. We'll change to this, and then we'll try it again. Now, very important, make sure you're in the right directory, right? Huh? I already have this done. I'm not going to read it. I could copy and paste, but yeah. No, thanks for that, though. That was a good observation. So there you go. Now, the first time this is going to push, it's going to probably take a while. I've already pushed this before, so it should be pretty quickly. When you're pushing in or deploying the whole package, specifically the Alexa stuff, it will take a little longer. It's got to build the models, right? So it's going to go through the whole building process as well. And then it's also going to push the Lambda stuff. So there's a bit of time. Now, you'll notice too, I'll do this later on, but you'll notice too, if you just target Lambda, it goes super quick. So it's a lot of fun doing that, just the Lambda stuff. And so what happens is once you push this, you'll be able to jump into the Alexa developer portal, and you'll see something like this. Actually, let me go back. You'll go into skills, so you'll have something like this. You'll be able to click on this, and this is essentially what it looks like. You could click on invocation. You can make changes to your invocation name here. When you first create it, and there it goes, it just gave me a notification that says build is successful. So if we go back to the IDE, there it goes. That means it's done. And so you come in here. So that's how you push from your IDE or Visual Studio Code to the cloud or to the dev portal. And then in the dev portal, if you want to make some changes and you want to sync it back, there's something else you could do as well. I'll get here, crypto currency. So we're going to create an intent. We're going to call it get crypto rates intent. And then you're going to type in the different utterances and your slots. So here we created a slot of type symbol. And then in so if we go to the slot types here and we go to symbol, we see here I kind of pre-filled it with 3 different currencies, Ethereum, Serum Coin, and Bitcoin. You could keep adding to this list. And then what's cool about this is that you could put the value, so it's Ethereum, Serum Coin, or Bitcoin, or whatever you want to add, but you could also add an ID, which is cool. What is cool about that is the API, specifically Crypto Compare the API, takes a symbol, right? It doesn't take the word Ethereum. It doesn't take the word Bitcoin, right? So if you're working with an API that has very specific parameters that it requires, you could do a little bit of massaging here and say, okay, I'm going to make the ID the parameter that it requires. So if they say Ethereum, it'll map to ETH. If they say Sia Coin, it'll match to SC and so on. And then you could add some synonyms. So if they come in and say, what's the price of Ether or ETH or Ethereum, whatever, it all always matches to ETH and Ethereum. So, and you could fill all that out. It's pretty cool. And then once you're done filling out these slot types, you'll go ahead and just add it to the intent. The intent model here, you could say, you know, price of symbol. So I'm going to go ahead and enter one. We'll call it rate of, or current rate, let's say. Current price of, and then to add in symbol, we'll say symbol. And then we'll go ahead and hit enter here, or plus. There you go. So as you can see here, it's pretty easy just to add there. And then once you've added all that, you could do a couple things, right? So you could go into the JSON editor here. Actually, let me hit save model. And if you go into the JSON editor, yeah, there, okay, it's there. You could copy and paste this whole document here, right? So Control A, and then come into your IDE and paste it right in there, and you're good to go. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it in the ASK, you could pull down the package, and the skill, the manifest, everything would get pulled down. So I'm not going to go ahead and do that right now. It's kind of outside the scope. So just keep that in mind, and I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, so once you've done that, and if you've created your skill, let's say you've created this entire skill and you're good to go. Okay, now what? Okay, we're just covering skill stuff here. Not a big deal. I've done this a million times before. We're going to go ahead and create another function. So if we go into Lambda, and go into function, and you hit create new function. I'm not going to do that right now because I already created it. So if actually, before I do that, let me just show you this one real quick. When you did that ASK deploy, and the skill manifest and everything and the intent models all went to the developer portal, which you just saw, it also goes, the Lambda stuff also goes into AWS, which is this code here that we're looking at. We see launch request handler, hello world, help intent, cancel and stop, so on and so forth. All this gets pushed into AWS. And so the functions, this is what it creates. It actually creates not only the skill in the developer portal, but it also creates the function in AWS, which is pretty cool. So if you click into that, you'll see it right here. So you see here, launch request handler, hello world intent handler, help intent handler, all that stuff's in there for you. And then so what we're going to do is create another function. And so I created another one here called a channel DF. Channel DF for channel dialog flow, right? So what do we have so far? We have the Alexa channel, right? And the function acts as a connector. So we have logic that's bringing in the intent models from Alexa, right? And we're able to process that. And so now we need a way to support another channel, right? Because this is all about multi-channel integrations. So we're going to create another channel in here. Let me see if I could blow this up so you can see what we're doing here. And so in this function here, we're bringing in the package HTTPS. Right? This is a Node NPM package. It's actually just available in Node. You don't have to do NPM install or anything. And what we're going to do is use that to make a call to the CryptoCompare API. So what happens is this exports handler is going to get called whenever this function gets hit. It's going to come in here. We're going to parse it out. It's going to do var request json.parse. And the payload of the dialog flow request payload, the model, is actually going to come into the event.body. So we're going to parse that out and encapsulate that into request. And then we're going to build a new model. This is where the common model comes into play. Right now, all our common model says is here's the parameters. So we have a symbol and we have a name. Now, we could build on this and include the intent name. So for instance, we could say intent, and we're not going to make one up. We'll just say request. What is it? Request query results. And I believe it's intent. And so that'll give you the intent name, right? And if you need anything else, anything at all that's available in the query results payload, just map it to your common model. It's your common model. You could put whatever you want in there, right? I'm going to go ahead and omit it for now because I don't want any errors. All right, so once you do have that payload, we're going to go ahead and stringify it. We're going to put it into the options, the host that we're going to post to, and the path and all that. And what you're seeing here is the path to what's called the intent handler. Okay, that's another function. We'll get into that in a minute. Because remember, our intent handler function for the purpose of today is to be able to process all intents, regardless of where it comes from. Whether it comes from Alexa, or Google Assistant, Facebook Messenger, it doesn't matter. Wherever it's coming from, we need this guy to be able to handle all those, right? And so what we're doing is normalizing it, right? Creating a normalized object model that the rest of the workflow can easily work with, and we don't have to change anything, right? So if, let's say Alexa, what's good about Amazon too is they're backwards compatible, and I mean, even from day one, what was being supported there is still pretty much supported today. In the case of Dialogflow, however, the switch from 1.0 to 2.0 had breaking changes. So, which is fine, just go, all you got to do at that point is go into your connector and make the change there if you want to support 2.0, right? And then the rest of the entire workflow stays intact. So if you have 1,000 intent handlers, you don't have to go into all 1,000 of those functions, right, and change your logic to support 2.0. All you got to do is update your mapping to your common model, and the common model handles the rest. And so this is just, you know, standard code to make a post request to this URL. Pretty straightforward stuff. And then that's it for the channel connector. So just at a high level, whether you're writing this in Python or C#, doesn't matter what language it is, you're bringing in a payload, you're converting that payload to a common model, and then you're making a request to a third-party API, or you're handling it writing in your code. Sometimes you don't need to make a call to a third-party API, right? So you could just hit your logic, or you could call internal API. So whether you're hitting Salesforce or Workday, or maybe you're hitting some internal graph database for whatever reason, or some internal systems, you could do that as well. I mean, it's totally up to you what you put in this stuff, right? And so that's it for the Dialogflow channel connector. That's it pretty much for the, let me see how I go back, for the Alexa skill. It's very similar. If we look at that, you can see we're doing something very similar. We're making a call here. So in the case of Alexa, where instead of looking at the entities like we did in Dialogflow, we're looking at slots. So we're mapping the slots, and you can see that the common model is very similar to what was in the other function, right? So we have parameters, symbol, and name, just like we did in channel Dialogflow. And again, the same thing. You could come in here and say intent, and then that would be, what is it, handler, request envelope, request intent, and I believe it's dot name or something like that, right? So that's how you add the intent name. And anything else you need, just map it. There's been cases where we used channel information. What's cool about Dialogflow too is it gives you original requests, what's called original requests. And that's the original payload that's coming in from Slack and Facebook and Twilio, right? And so you could really analyze those payloads and do whatever you need to do with those. And same thing here, we're making a call to the intent handler, okay? Same code that you saw in the other function. You could literally just copy and paste it. And so we have that, and then there's one more step here. We can just go back to functions real quick. While I do this, if you guys have any questions along the way, feel free to say, stop what you're doing, and raise your hand or something, okay? So let's see here. Let me just go back. And okay, here we go. The intent handler function. You're going to create that third function, You call it intent handler, call it intent router, you call it whatever you want. In this case, what we should really call it is intent crypto handler or something like that, because it's very specific to getting cryptocurrency prices, right? Like I said, for today's demo purposes, we're skipping the whole routing piece, so we're just going to go right into the intent handler, which in this case is grabbing the cryptocurrency price. So here it's a very similar process. We're calling HPS. We're converting the model. In this case, it should be the common model that we saw earlier. What we saw earlier only had parameters, added the one intent to it, so feel free to add whatever you want. That should all be available now in this var model object here. And very similarly, I could pull slots, I could pull parameters, and what that looks like. So, and then I could pass over the symbol or whatever's in your slot values over to that third-party API. And this is pretty standard out-of-the-box stuff. We're just doing HTTP GET and pinging that service. And then on the response, when it comes back, what we're doing is formulating a response. So in the case of this particular intent handler, we're saying if there's a response data or the response equals error, we're going to say, sorry, we cannot find name, please specify the correct symbol, nice user-friendly error message. And then in the case of there being actual data, we're going to go ahead and format it and give you back the actual data values, right? And so once we have that all tied together, and so that's it for the three functions. So remember, we have three functions right now. We have the channel connector for Alexa, the channel connector for Dialogflow, and our intent handler. Okay. So let's give it a shot. We're going to go to test. See if the audio works on here. What's the price of What's the price of Bitcoin? Okay, let me try this. What's the price of Bitcoin? Oh, I see what we need to do. First, you got to invocate it, right? So you can say open crypto rates. Guess there is no audio. So you can see here it came back, says welcome to crypto rates. You can get the cryptocurrency price for any crypto. And I know I skipped over that part, but I'll go ahead and show you where I did that. That's it right in here, right in the launch request. So when you do open or start, I'm sure many of you know this already, it goes right into launch request. So I'm going to say, what's the price of Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is $8,136
Oh, audio's there.
US dollars and 66 cents. 6,936
Oh.
euros and 7 cents.
Looks like it's making a comeback. It was at 6,000 last week, wasn't it? Interesting. Okay, so there you go. That gives you an example of what that looks like. So let's jump into Dialogflow now and go through that process. So when you first get to Dialogflow, let me see if I can log out here real quick. Okay, it just takes me back in. So you're going to see something like this once you log in. And you're going to have your intents, your entities, very similar to what you see in Alexa, right? So if I go into intents, I'm going to go ahead and create a new intent. In this case, we're calling it get crypto price intent. And we're going to type in similar utterances to what we did in Alexa. So we have what's the price of ETH, what's the price of BTC today, and these are the same thing, symbol. What you'll want to make sure you do is make sure that your intent name matches whatever you put in Alexa. And I know you're thinking, oh, okay, now we got to manage two different NLPs. This is crazy, right? There's a couple things you could do there. You could either have everything in either Lex or Watson or some similar service like that. The only problem with that, you're not going to be able to target Alexa, right? Because Alexa, you have to essentially use those NLPs. What's cool about Dialogflow, and this is something I do in the Pluralsight course, I actually start with Dialogflow. And in Dialogflow, what I do is that there's an export function. Now, the problem is the new release doesn't really support a lot of that stuff. So the new developer portal, which is what you see here, this whole new intent model, interaction model that we're looking at, doesn't really support it. So if you go to integrations and you go to Alexa, you could export for Alexa. So you could take those export files and publish them to Alexa, right? Which is kind of cool. You could also import here. Now, I'm not sure if that supports the new version, but it's something worth looking into. And if you definitely make a go at this, another thing you could do is essentially write your own conversion, right? So do some data transformation process that will actually convert to and from. So you can convert from Dialogflow to Alexa or Alexa to Dialogflow. That way you keep them both in sync. And then you can use the CLI tools to maintain that synchronization between the two services. And so let's go back. Why isn't it going back? Close, okay. Let me go back here to intents. And so we create the new intent. Like again, make sure that the name is the same as in Alexa. You have your slots. In this case, they're called, parameters or entities. And if we go here to entities, this is how you essentially create it. You can create a new entity, and you'll see something very similar as to what you saw in Alexa. The only difference with Dialogflow and Alexa is that Dialogflow doesn't have ID, unfortunately. So what you could do is you could just make this the symbol and then map everything else to that, right? And so if we come back here, we have our intent. And then the last thing you're going to do, well, not the last thing, but one thing you want to do to make sure that it hits your channel DF or whatever connector that you want this to hit is update the fulfillment tab. So if you go to the Lambda function and you go to channel DF, remember channel DFs are a connector for Dialogflow. We're going to click on that and we're going to get the URL from somewhere in here. Does anybody know how to get the URL from? Anyone here use AWS Lambda at all? You use Lambda? Do you know where to pull the URL from? Do you know what I'm talking about? I want to find it so I can help you guys out with this, because I can't, for the life of me, I can't remember. Or is that in the gateway? Sorry, I'm an Azure guy.
Yeah, no, you want to get like the actual
Yeah,
like
see.
put it in.
Yeah, so you see here?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Can you do it in function? Because I think it's in the summary. Oh wait, this looks different than the one I actually used.
Oh, here. I think I know. Oh, see, that's weird. It says configure. Oh, here it is. Okay, found it. So that's what I thought, the API gateway stuff. So what you do is you come in here and you copy this URL. Keep that in mind, API gateway. Go into here. That's probably why I had this tab open, so I can remember that. I totally forgot. Let's see, Dialogflow, and then you're going to paste that into the webhook. Thank you, by the way. So you're going to paste that right in here, and then you're going to save it. Now, this is one thing I hate too about Dialogflow. You got to scroll all the way down here. It'd be nice if they had a save button up on the top. So once you get that going, you've enabled it, you plugged in the URL, you should now be able to come in here and, okay, you could come in here and say, what's the price of Bitcoin, right? Very similar to how we did in Alexa. And so you can see right there, let's see if we've got some audio. It should sound weird. Huh. Very cool. So as you can see, same thing, very similar to Alexa's test tab. You're able to come in here on the side panel here and test out your Dialogflow integration. And so once you have your Dialogflow integration, your Alexa skills working properly, everything's hitting your channel connectors and your 10 handler, everything's functioning properly on that side of the house, you want to start plugging in your interfaces. Obviously, Alexa's already hooked up, so you're able to go into your Alexa device, enabled device, like your Echo or your Spot, and start using the skill right away. As the owner of that skill, you could then share with others, invite for beta, things like that. Of course, you got to cover all the other areas like uploading the images and things like that. Get it ready for certification, and then there you could publish it and be able to share with everyone else. But as far as we've gotten just now, you're able to test it yourself. Everything should be working fine. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to plug into different channels. The cool thing about integrations specifically, like I said before, you have all this out-of-the-box stuff. This is new, Dialogflow Phone Gateway. Interesting. Got to play with that one. But as you can see here, there's Slack, there's Facebook Messenger, Twitter, there's Twilio if you want to do text messaging. Very cool stuff. Skype even. If you're familiar with Bot Framework, you'll see something similar there as well. You could totally plug into there. If you wanted to do that, all you would do is what? Create a connector for Bot Framework, right? Same way we did for Alexa, same way we did for Dialogflow. And you could really expand the scope of your channels. I think collectively there's like 30 different channels, something like that. And so let's check out Web Demo. If we come in here, it gives you this cool URL that you could click on. And it kind of gives you this like web-based interface. I don't know how many of you guys have customers or work on web-based type of chat interfaces, but it's definitely an ask that I get a lot of. And you could, put like support, help desk support on your website, things like that. And then you can come in here and say, what's the price? Let's try Coin this time, switch it up. And there you go, it gives you the price of Coin. So it's all hitting that entire workflow we just created, right? So those three functions, they're all converging into that. In this particular case, it's just hitting the two. In the case of Alexa, it's hitting their respective two, right? So that's one way of testing this on Dialogflow. So let me close this. And then there's Facebook Messenger. So Facebook Messenger, if you want to test this on Facebook Messenger, and you could totally do this with Slack. You don't have to do Facebook. If you're like, I hate Facebook, let's try it on Slack. You could totally do that on Slack. This is the way you do it. You basically come in here. Now, when you first open this up, it's going to be something like this, and you're going to enable it. It's going to turn blue. You're going to come in here and type in the callback URL. For Dialogflow, actually, you copy the callback URL. You go into Facebook. When you go into Facebook, there's like this whole area for creating bots in Facebook, right? There's going to be a callback URL. You're going to plug that into there. You're going to put a verified token. This could be whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. So that's just a kind of a handshake. If the tokens line up, you're good to go. And then the page access token, that's something you copy from Facebook and you paste it into here. And then you hit start, and it's up and running. And so now we should be able, you get this bot was started. That lets you know that things are working good. And now if I jump into Facebook, hopefully I don't have any bad Facebook messages pop up. Let's see. Oh, maybe there's something, it's me talking there. That's kind of cool. Oh, there's me with a mustache. Here we go. So we'll come in here. So I've tied it up to this page now. And so the bot's going to be available here. So if I come in, actually, let me go back, and I come into Messenger. Let's say see all in Messenger. I should be able to pull up my bot here. Let me see. Was it this one? Okay, you're going to get this get started. And then it kicks into that. And so I should be able to say, what's the price of, let's say, Ether this time. And there you go. You're plugged into Facebook. So that was really easy. I mean, of course I did a lot of it up front, so you didn't get to see a lot of the nuances that come with Facebook. But if you're familiar with creating bots on Facebook, you pick that up really easily. There's plenty of documentation out there that helps you do that. And then once you do make that connection, you're good to go, basically. I mean, you're plugging into the channel connectors, you're plugging into your 10 routers and your 10 handlers and all that good stuff, and you're ready to evolve your skill or your bot and have it do many other things, right? And just keep in mind different limitations. So there's, I think Alexa skills is like 250 skills, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone? So there's limitations there. I mean, sorry, not skills, intents. Dialogflow has like 1,500 intents that it could support as well. So keep that in mind when you're creating your skill as well. But at least the underlying infrastructure would be able to handle literally thousands of intents, and you could scale tremendously as the limitation restrictions get lifted from a lot of these, services and channels, and NLP providers and whatnot. So I think we're done really early. If anyone has any questions or want me to take a look at your code, we could kind of walk through it, and we're good to go. Question?
Just say a few words about the maintenance of it. Now you got this all synced to sync. How do you go about something changes, integration changes?
If anything changes, where specifically?
Well, I guess the easy one is probably your common.
Oh, the common model? Yeah, so the common model, you would treat it just like any model, right? You would segment that into, a business objects layer or models layer, right? And then have it centralized there, right? And so if you need to make any changes, then yes, you'd have to do some refactoring. Let's say you add a new common model parameter or something like that, and you want to, include it, obviously. Like in the case of the intent name, we weren't handling intent name. Previously, we were just handling parameters, right? We were looking for the parameter.symbol or whatever the case is. And so let's say we want to add a new one like intent name, and then of course you'd have to go into your intent handlers that will be working with the intent name or whatever else you're adding to it, and making those changes accordingly. A lot of times what I've seen happen in the past is we'll architect a complete common model with 100 different variables, and of course you're not going to catch everything, right? So you're going to jump in and add something later on. You may have 110 handlers, but it may not affect all the different intent handlers, right? And you'll probably just use it in maybe 2 or 3 intent handlers, right? In that case, you just go into those, and then as needed, you go into the other intent handlers and refactor those as needed, basically. Does that answer your question, or is that a little convoluted, or are we good? That's good. Okay, cool. Anybody else have any questions? No? Going once, going twice? Sold. All right, cool. Well, thank you, everyone. If you, feel free to reach out, and I think I have some contact info on my deck here. There it is. I'll just go ahead and open that up. So feel free to stay in touch. If you have any questions, reach out anytime. I love to help. Just shoot me an email, and good to go. All right? Thank you.